Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
Hey everyone, welcome to Project Uproar. It's me, Igor, and Ryan, and we have a very special guest today, and Ryan will introduce him.
Okay, so today we're speaking with the Ultramarathon man himself, Dean Karnazes. So Time magazine named Dean one of the top 100 most influential people in the world. Men's Fitness hailed him as one of the fittest men on the planet. Dean is an acclaimed endurance athlete and New York Times bestselling author, and he has pushed his body and mind to inconceivable limits. Along his many accomplishments, he has run 50 marathons in all 50 US states in 50 consecutive days. He's also run 350 continuous miles, foregoing sleep for 3 nights. He's run across the Sahara Desert in 120-degree temperatures, and he's run a marathon to the South Pole in negative 40 degrees. On 10 different occasions, he's run a 200-mile relay race solo, racing alongside teams of 12. His long list of competitive achievements include winning the world's toughest foot race, the Badwater Ultramarathon, running 135 miles nonstop across Death Valley during the middle of the summer. He has raced and competed in all 7 continents of the planet twice over. Dean is also an ESPN ESPY winner, 3-time recipient of Competitor Magazine's Endurance Athlete of the Year, and serves as the U.S. Athletic Ambassador. He's twice carried the Olympic torch and in 2019 received the President's Council on Sport, Fitness, and Nutrition Lifetime Achievement Award. Dean and his adventures have been featured on The Today Show, 60 Minutes, The Late Show with David Letterman, CBS News, CNN, ESPN, The Howard Stern Show, Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and many others. He has appeared on the cover of Runner's World, Outside, and Wired magazine, and has been featured in Time, Newsweek, People, GQ, The New York Times, USA Today, to name a few. And today we are privileged to have him on Project Uproar. So Dean, thank you again and welcome to the show.
Hey, I was getting exhausted just listening to the introduction.
You've lived an impressive life, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, it wasn't what I was planning, but it's the way it turned out, and yeah, it's been a wild ride.
For sure. So Dean, I just want to start with your book, Ultramarathon Man. So I read it this week again. Amazing book, especially myself and Igor. We are, I would say, Igor, you've been running a bit longer than me, but we are new to the whole, I would say, formal running
Exactly, scene. Marathon running and stuff like that. We did our first half marathon the year that just passed, so 2019. But we love running, but we just haven't been as extreme as you have with it.
So it's an interesting culture that I live in with ultramarathoners, but I can kind of relate to you guys because I still run a lot of marathons and half marathons. So I know you did something that's very noble. Not a lot of people can finish a half marathon, so congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. For us, it definitely was more difficult than from some ultramarathon runners.
For sure. So in your book, Ultramarathon Man, you described your enjoyment running home from school. And I found interesting because I myself am a teacher. So what did running provide you early on in life that you felt school did not?
I don't know if I should be telling you this because you're a teacher, but my mom was a lifelong middle school teacher as well, so I have a special place in my heart for all educators. With that said, my earliest childhood recollections were sitting in kindergarten and just trying to force myself to have the discipline to sit still because I knew I wasn't supposed to run around and bug people. But what 5-year-old boy can sit still and pay attention? I mean, that's what the teacher would say: sit still and pay attention. And every 5-year-old kid is kind of hardwired to go wild and not pay attention.
Yeah.
So I just waited and waited for school to get out, and once school got out, I started running, and I would run home from kindergarten. And I remember that's when I felt like I was, most free, and I could relate to the world. It's kind of like moving, through the environment at 6 miles an hour. I ran home on different routes, I remember, and I was just a young boy. But I remember running by a park, and I remember the trees turning colors as the seasons changed. And I really found running as kind of an education and a way to relate to the world. I was sitting in the classroom, being told what the world's like, and I felt like once I got outside the walls of the classroom, I could experience what the world was really like.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, that's fascinating. Even myself, I'm only a third year teacher, so I'm very new to the teaching field. But even growing up as a student, I only remember one time in my life, it was a university, that we actually had class outdoors. And we actually kind of walked outside and discussed the seminar readings for the day. It always seems like, the difficult thing about school is that idea of how it's constraining, usually in one room, and there's not a lot of movement.
Mm-hmm. Usually people telling you what to do rather than you deciding your own path.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting you said you had one class where you were outside. I'm 100% Greek, and I've studied a lot of ancient Greek. And, Aristotle, who was a teacher, founded the Lyceum, which was after Plato's academy.
Mm-hmm.
He used to teach classes by wandering around. Aristotle did. They were called the peripatetics, which means the wanderers. So that's how he taught his class, is walking around Athens. And I think, there's a saying that motion stirs emotion. I think when you're moving, you just are more receptive to new ideas, and your mind is more open than when you're sitting idle in a man-made structure like a classroom.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And we even have a lot of philosophers who were big walkers, right? So they even turned to walking to get out of kind of writing blocks and stuff like that.
Yeah, Nietzsche is a famous peripatetic as well. I mean, he said something like, only good thoughts come while moving.
Exactly. And we also wanted to ask, we found your initial story very interesting, right? And how you kind of had that transformation at 30. So we have this question about how in your book you talk about your corporate job and how it made you feel as if you were running fast, but not forward. And we'd just like to elaborate what you meant by this and kind of take us through you at 30.
Yeah, so I'd gone through college, and then I went to graduate school after that. And after graduate school, I decided I also needed a business degree, so I went to business school.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a very comfortable corporate job in San Francisco. I had all the perks that come with a good job like that. I had, a fat paycheck, good bonus program, stock options. I had a company car, 401k matching program, healthcare, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt hollow inside. I achieved quote unquote success as it is defined. If you're making a lot of money and you're young and you're successful, that you should be happy. And that was the prescription that society kind of handed to me. But I followed that prescription, and I was hollow. I was kind of miserable, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing was difficult in my life anymore. It just seemed so easy and unrewarding. And that night of my 30th birthday, I was in a bar in San Francisco doing what a lot of people do on their 30th birthday.
Definitely.
And, at midnight, I said, I'm leaving, and my friend said, well, let's have another round of tequila to celebrate your 30th birthday. And I said, no, instead I'm going to run 30 miles right now to celebrate my 30th birthday.
Yeah, it's such a great
they
story.
looked at me and they said, but you're not a runner, you're drunk. And I said, I am, but I'm still going to do it. And I walked out of the bar and started running. And that night forever changed the course of my life.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with Igor about this story, how your first kind of long run, especially I think you said you took about 15 years off from running. Am I correct? Before you went for your big...
Yeah, it was about... Yeah, I stopped running as a freshman in high school after cross country.
Yeah.
And then picked it up, about 15 years.
Yeah, so you take these 15 years off, and you go out and run 30 miles.
Mm-hmm.
How was your body? I mean, I'm sure there was pain, but how did your body survive? Because I know with myself and Igor, we when I first tried training for the half marathon, I ran about 18 kilometers, and it was a huge stretch from what I did before. And my knee was just shot. I injured myself. I cramped up. I couldn't walk anymore. How did you survive running those 30 kilometers with no training?
Yeah.
You make
30 miles.
I was drunk, I guess, and I sobered up.
That's the key.
On the road kind of thing. And I found that I kind of liked the pain. It was a bizarre feeling. you do people do a lot of crazy things when they've been drinking, and it's my legs were kind of numb. But by the time I was 10 or 12 miles into it, I started sobering up and realizing this is really a difficult endeavor. And I thought about stopping quite a bit, but something just clicked. I mean, it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and that all the stars were out, and I was on this backcountry road all by myself, and I could just smell the eucalyptus, the gum trees, and it got almost kind of romantic in a way. And I didn't want to stop at a point. I thought this is really living.
Wow.
I was the only one out there, and I could hear wild animals scurrying around in the bushes, but I really wasn't scared at all. I just felt like finally I'm alive again, and just kept going. And let's be honest, it wasn't a fast pace I was running, and I was walking a lot of the times and kind of tripping and stumbling, but I did make it 30 miles, and like I said, that fateful night forever changed the course of my life.
No, that's amazing. And just staying on the topic of pain, we're fascinated by this topic because Igor and I, some of the content that we've produced on this channel and this podcast have been about Stoic philosophy. And the Stoics talk all the time about the importance of embracing discomfort because it helps build character. So I'm curious for yourself, you read a lot about embracing pain through physical activity. Why is it important to do this? Why shouldn't we just kind of live that comfortable life or just kind of not creep out of our comfort zone? Why is pain important in life?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think pain is inevitable. I think, and it's the way you respond to pain. I mean, if you watch TV, I would say half the ads you see are from pharmaceutical companies, telling you take this drug so you can avoid pain. And I think we've got it wrong. I think that in the absence of pain, we go numb. To me, embracing pain and welcoming it and seeing it as a challenge to overcome, just like any other challenge, is a better approach. And the Stoics, they famously say, don't try to control that which you can't control. I think pain is something you really can't control, and the more we try to by popping ibuprofen or whatever else drugs, the worse off we are.
Yeah, it's almost like you're preemptively choosing your own pain rather than just inevitably having pain given to you, a different kind of pain.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And another question, I love these kinds of questions specifically, but like, let's say you could jump into a time machine. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
What would I say to myself? I guess don't take myself too seriously, and don't take life too seriously. And follow your own path. It's scary to tell people, hey, if you want to be a basket weaver, you should be a basket weaver. You should resign from your job and pour your heart and soul into doing what you really love. But if you can actually make that transition, and your vocation becomes your passion, the two are intertwined. It's just such a happier and healthier existence.
Very cool.
Yeah. On the topic of passion, you talk in your book about the importance of having a why in running. I'm curious to know, what is your why, and has it changed since publishing Ultramarathon Man?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think, the Ultramarathon Man was my first of 4 books, and I'm actually working on my 5th book right now, and all of them are trying to get at the why. Why do we run? It's counterintuitive, right? Like we talked about, it's painful. Your body is struggling. Your body wants to stop, but you will it to keep going. Why do we do this? There's no necessity for running in this day and age. I mean, we've got cars, we've got food delivery, we soon will have drone delivery, but some people still choose to do something that's strenuous and difficult. And I think therein again is the magic, is we run because it is hard. Life is easy, and that's why we run, because running is not easy. And we need that struggle. We need that fight and that war in our life. And I think running fills that void in a lot of ways.
And you just mentioned writing books, right? Another one of your passions. And I was wondering, How similar are writing books and running, and do the two activities complement each other? And just in general, what significance has writing had in your life?
Yeah, no, I think the two are very complementary. I mean, I think they're both 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Great.
It's mostly just grunt, hard grunt work. But I think, runners have a lot of time on their hands. When you go out for 3 or 4 or 5 hour training runs, you have a lot of time to think. And, I know you guys read a lot of Stoic literature. One of the key takeaways from that is having time on your own to think, reflective time, not to be constantly in activity mode. So when I run, I can think through, the issues of the day. I can think through my writing. I can try to galvanize my thoughts and answer that why question more clearly. And that's a complex question. I mean, it's such a simple act, running, right? We're just, putting one foot in front of the other at an accelerated pace. But it's profound in that way. It's profoundly powerful. And trying to really peel back the layers and say, why is it so profoundly powerful? There's so many people. You can really meditate on those sort of questions as you're running.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I know myself what running has allowed me to develop outside of the act itself is developing patience. And you talked about putting one foot in front of the other, like myself, being a fairly newly graduate out of university. I hear a lot of other graduates saying how, they have to wait so long to get maybe their dream job. And I was in that same boat myself. I was stressed about not many opportunities were coming up, and I didn't want to be patient. And I think what running really taught me a life lesson was sometimes we just have to wait, and we have to kind of bear uncomfortable situations. And I know probably yourself, you've run obviously days without sleep. What kind of life lessons have running taught you?
That nothing without struggle is worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not difficult to do, it's probably not a worthwhile endeavor. And if it's not painful, and if it isn't incredibly challenging, then it's not worth pursuing. Mm-hmm. So, running has taught me that, and writing, and getting older has taught me that, not everything is going to go your way. And that's really what defines a person is, how do you respond when things don't go your way? And how do you grow from that? And how do you actually embrace it? I mean, to your point of patience, you might be in a job that is not that fulfilling, and it might be a stepping stone along the way. How do you actually engage fully in that not so fulfilling job, and really, I guess, grow from the boredom or whatever it might be, the unfulfillment, and become better. So many people live a life of, as Thoreau said, a life of quiet desperation. How do you not live that way?
Mm-hmm. And I noticed that it seems like, especially with the 30-year birthday, that it almost seemed like you were using death and the idea that, you could blink and you could be 60 and then 90, and then you never know kind of how quickly this life passes. You felt like you didn't even live until 30. So has death been like a motivating factor for you, pushing you to kind of do things you wouldn't have otherwise done?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, had someone said to me, I'd be crossing the 50-year mark and still being a runner, and a writer, I would have said, no way, I'm going to be some, corporate guy. I'll be, on my 3rd or 4th marriage, driving a red sports car, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I never anticipated I'd be where I am, and I'm so glad that I am where I'm at. And, we're talking about a theme that's much more common these days than when I published Ultramarathon Man, and that's the idea of doing something, breaking out on your own. And, with the gig economy and so forth, it's so much easier now. Before, when I wrote about my departure from the corporate world, that was kind of, if you were, an MBA, a business student, that's what you did. You weren't an entrepreneur necessarily. You went into the corporate world. And now it's much easier not to go into the corporate world. So I think, Ultramarathon Man has stayed relevant in that regard because it's a good read for someone who's in their mid-20s. it kind of gives them the permission to follow their own course. Reading about someone else that's done something that you admire is empowering, right? And I think that's kind of the magic of that book.
Yeah, and I feel like your path was running, obviously, but it resonates, I think, with everyone. Just feeling like sometimes you're in the wrong path and then discovering something that gets you in the right path and you're willing to sweat and bleed for. I feel like that's like the hero's journey. It's just something that everyone can relate to.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, my fifth book that I'm working on now is how do you stay true to that, over decades of time as your body's getting older and some of the thrills kind of, the newness and the freshness is worn off. Ultramarathon Man was a coming of age book. Once you come of age, how do you stay the course?
Mm-hmm.
And those are other skill sets I'm having to develop, as I'm maturing is, how do I keep my endurance at a certain level and how do I, stay relevant? And, these kind of challenges I think are good for people to read about because I know a lot of people, especially people a little bit older than you guys, are, those are themes that are very common.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Getting back to those physical challenges, I'm just curious, what would you consider the best moment running for you was? And what was your worst moment up to date?
Yeah, well, I can tell you unequivocally my favorite moment, and I've run on all 7 continents of Earth twice, as you said in the introduction, and I've run, some of the most exotic and remote places on the planet. But my favorite run ever, and my most glorious run ever, was a 10K. And you're going to think, hold it, 10K, that's only 6.2 miles, and you run hundreds. Well, I ran a 10K with my daughter, Alexandria, on her 10th birthday.
Oh, very cool.
And, to me as a father, that nothing will surpass that.
Mm-hmm. And
then my worst run, I don't know if I've had comical runs. I don't know if I've had a worse run, but I certainly had a lot of comical moments, and I've had run-ins with just about every sort of animal you can imagine. Those are some of the moments that I guess could be considered my worst. I also, I ran 6 days across the Atacama Desert, which is the driest place on Earth, and and it was a self-supported race, so it was 250 kilometers, carrying everything you needed in your backpack for 6 days, no showers, nothing. That got a little crusty after a while, after a week of running.
I believe that.
Yeah. I'm curious, in your book, going back to Ultramarathon Man, getting back to kind of those difficult runs, I was reading the one chapter, and this was the one on Badwater. And I'm curious, you decided to include your initial failure, like your attempt at Badwater, and how disappointed you were. Why did you decide to include a moment when you failed in the book?
I think it was important to include a failure because a lot of people, you read about me, you read all those accolades, and those are all my successes. But, I've got a long list of failures as well you could have read off. And I think a lot of people overlook that. So I thought, write about a failure, but more importantly, write about how you responded to a failure. I'm sure some people would, have failed at the Badwater Ultramarathon, nearly died as I did, and said, thank God I'm still alive. I'm never going to do anything like that again. And my reaction, as you know, is a little bit different, was, I failed miserably. How am I going to succeed next time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And you use it as a growing moment.
I think so. I think, failure teaches us a lot more than success.
Mm-hmm.
When we succeed at something, we high-five each other and you pop the champagne. When you fail, you tend to get very reflective. And you tend to turn inward and really analyze what went wrong and how you can improve it the next time around.
And I have one more question. I don't know if Ryan has one more after this, but I also would like to know, because we're obviously big on reading, right? And you clearly have done your reading and writing. And I'd say, what books had the biggest impact on you? And which books would you recommend to those searching for happiness and meaning in their lives?
Wow, these are some good questions. I tend to listen to nonfiction. my mom, was a literature teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and she always said, fiction's the work of the devil.
Wow.
So, a book that, really influenced me in sort of in a creative way was called Into the Wild.
Mm-hmm.
And that was by John Krakauer. He's the same guy that wrote Into Thin Air.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that book was, it touched on some deeper themes about life than I had really explored, about, some really adventurous people and not so adventurous people, and the way they kind of behaved in the wilderness. So those were good books. Edith, I can't remember her last name. She wrote The Greek Way.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a very, very good book. Paul Cartledge, who's a professor at Cambridge, he's like one of the foremost authorities on ancient Greek culture. He wrote a book called Democracy, A Life, and that's a really good book. It's a little more intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
I think, anyone and everyone should read Herodotus, who's the father of history.
Yeah.
A good interpretation of Herodotus is really profound. As is Homer. I mean, I can't tell you how many different versions of Homer I've read, how many different translations, and I never get tired of Homer and those themes and those stories.
Very cool. So it seems like your Greek roots have very much influenced you and your running journey too.
Yeah, I just still think it's so amazing that 2,500 years ago, people kind of were having the same thoughts and same dilemmas that we're facing today.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And the Greeks really thought them through, and they had a lot of solutions. I mean, Socrates he had a lot of solutions, and a lot of those apply to life today.
Definitely. We always kind of seek new answers, but really kind of we're just rediscovering old answers in a new form, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree. I mean, as soon as we stopped hunting and gathering and started, becoming cultural beasts, learning how to live properly, those themes started, more than 2,500 years ago.
For sure. Dean, this is the last question. It's kind of a two-part question. First of all, what's your current running routine now? And as well, are you working towards something like a new running endeavor?
Yeah, so my current running routine now is I typically try to take off. And when I say off, I really, back down on my mileage over the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
I really try to be present for my family. So I'm kind of coming off, some lighter recovery kind of weeks, if you will. And I'll start ramping up my training soon by running a lot of races. Yeah, so I'm going to be doing a lot of racing locally in my area. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there's a race, somewhere nearby every weekend. So sometimes I'll run to the start of the race, and then run the race, and then run home.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I train for these longer distances. And then as far as like big, what they call BHAGs or big, hairy, audacious goals, my next big goal is to try to run a marathon in every country of the world in a 1-year time span.
Wow.
So the UN recognizes 203 different countries, and I'd like to set out on a global expedition to run a marathon in each and every one of them in 1 year.
Yeah, that would definitely make the history books. Right?
And if you're interested in Canada, we just actually had not too long ago the mayor of we're from Niagara Falls, Canada, and we had the mayor of Niagara Falls on our podcast. And I'm pretty sure if you mentioned you were interested in doing that, running in Canada, so when you're obviously one of the countries, he'd be more than interested in hosting you in the city.
I'll have to look him up.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Dean. We really appreciate this for you taking the time to actually come on the show.
No, it's been great chatting with you guys. I appreciate everything you're doing. And like I said, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, 100%. And keep trucking, keep running, and we'll be looking at you and getting inspiration from you.
Well, you keep doing the same. And, when I get this marathon every country world expedition all finalized, you ought to pick a country other than Canada and come run with me.
Yeah, that would be quite the challenge. Yeah, we'll do one of the 10K. No, we're trying to up our game too. So we're definitely interested in taking you up on that.
Well, do what you can. We do what we can.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dean.
Okay, guys. Have a great day.
You too.
See ya.
Cheers.